A few months ago, I went on a 7-day fast where I didn't eat a single thing, and it turned out to be the most productive week of my life, and I have never felt better before or since this time. I was a bit curious about why I received some of these benefits, so I reached out to one of the world's leading fasting experts, Dr. Jason Fung, to ask him some questions about why fasting provides these benefits, what the potential consequences might be, and how you can maximize the advantages while minimizing the drawbacks during your own fast. If this is something that you're interested in trying and you want to improve some specific blood markers along the way, then I recommend purchasing a test kit through the sponsor of this video, Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked delivers blood testing kits directly to your door, which you can administer yourself by using a simple pinprick, collecting your blood sample, and shipping it to their lab using the prepaid shipping label in the box. Click the link in the description below this video and use the coupon code RIMMER20 at checkout to save 20% off your first order. So here's my conversation with Dr. Jason Fung. Hopefully you learned something from this and maybe even try incorporating a fast into your life.
What is your medical specialization? Is that the right way of saying it? Specialization or practice?
Yeah. So I'm a kidney specialist. So basically, what I did is it's a medical school. So I did it at the University of Toronto, and then I did internal medicine training, which is a further 3 years, and then I did a further 2 years subspecialty in kidney disease at the University of California, Los Angeles. So that's like 5 years after medical school is the typical training stage for like a medical specialist. So that's what I do, kidneys.
Kidneys. And what led you from specializing in the kidneys to becoming the world's expert in fasting?
It's an interesting story because I actually hadn't had any interest in nutrition or weight loss for, up well past my training. So it was not really what I did. But the thing is that if you look at what causes kidney disease, by far and away, it winds up being type 2 diabetes. So, and that's very highly correlated to weight. So essentially, if you lose weight, very often the type 2 diabetes will go away. If you don't have type 2 diabetes, you don't develop the kidney disease. And that's sort of where I started become. So over the last 30, 40 years, obesity, of course, is going like this. Since the 1980s and 1990s, type 2 diabetes is going like this. So even though when I started my training, type 2 diabetes was not a huge problem, it has steadily become a bigger and bigger and bigger problem. And that's where I started to become very interested in sort of what we're doing. And the problem I had was really, if you look at what the doctors and the researchers were doing, they're looking for drugs to treat type 2 diabetes. And to me, that made no sense because here's a disease that we know, like everybody knows, that if you lose weight, you don't get the type 2 diabetes or it goes away, right? You lose weight, it gets better. So therefore, to me, it was like, why are you putting all your effort into developing drugs that don't actually make you lose weight? Because that doesn't make any sense. What you need to do is help people lose weight. It's natural. It's it's healthier. Then you don't get the diabetes. Then you don't get the problems of diabetes because that makes more sense to me. You're attacking the root cause as opposed to trying to fix it afterwards. It's sort of like if you never change the oil in your car and then it breaks down and you're trying to develop, stronger fan belts and stuff. It's like, okay, well, why don't you just change the oil in your car? Same thing. Address the real root problem, which is the weight, and then everything else sort of falls into line. And that's where I became very, very interested in that. And that's when I started talking about it, writing about it. So I wrote the obesity code, and we developed a program which became the fastingmethod.com to help people with sort of weight loss and intermittent fasting.
And did you start by researching different diets, or did you go right for fasting from the beginning?
No, I spent years just trying to understand it, what causes weight gain. Because, again, to me, this question was completely unsatisfactory, that people simply ate too many calories and therefore they gain weight, as if it's a simple scale. That is, okay, well, you're burning 2,000 calories, you're eating 3,000, therefore you're going to gain 2 pounds a week sort of thing. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. If you actually go back in the literature and look at what Americans, for example, were eating in the 1800s, it's like 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day. And there's no obesity. So it's like, how can that possibly be? It doesn't make any sense. So it's the types of food that we're eating, the sort of highly processed foods, the stuff that's very highly refined carbohydrates and that kind of thing. It's the types of foods that we're eating that was causing the weight gain, as opposed to so the point is that if you take in calories, your body can do one of two things. It can store it or it can burn it, right? And the problem is not the calories. The problem is what your body does with the calories. And that depends on the hormones in your body. So if certain hormones are high, you'll store it. If certain other hormones are high, you're going to burn it. So the point is that it's really a problem of what the body does with those calories, not necessarily the total number of calories, which is where the sort of disconnect was. We thought the problem was, the amount, when it's really the type and what it does with it. So once you understand that, you say, okay, well, there are certain hormones, say insulin, which promote fat gain because that's its job, actually. So certain foods are more stimulating to insulin. And the other thing is that if you don't eat, then insulin's going to fall. And that's where I started using intermittent fasting because, of course, it's a method that's been used for thousands of years, but also it's a intervention that's relatively simple. So as opposed to a diet where eat this but not this and a little bit of this and watch out for this, it's simply don't eat from this time till this time. That's it. You're letting your body use your body fat for energy, which is literally the actual reason that we carry it. So you're using the fat for what it's there for, which to me is like, hey, that's perfect. Like, is it fun? No, it's not fun, but it's going to make you healthier because, one, if you don't eat, your blood sugars will come down. So if you have type 2 diabetes, that's great. I don't have to put you on medications. If you keep fasting, you're going to lose weight. If you lose weight, your diabetes will go away. So, hey, that's great too. So it's the same, the process of trying to understand obesity took a long time. And once you understand it, then you can sort of get to rational solutions, as opposed to most people who just say, oh, it's calories in, calories out, do more exercise. It's like, okay, but does that actually work? Like, or cut 500 calories a day. That's been the standard advice. Well, does it actually work? And the answer is that no, it actually doesn't work at all. We have so many studies on just cutting a few calories every day. That strategy has been used, and it's failed in almost every single study that has been done on. It simply doesn't work.
Does it fail because the person who's trying to do that isn't effective at implementing the 500 calorie reduction, or does it fail because they're implementing it properly and there's some alternative mechanism that's preventing it?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So what happens, of course, is that, so this is the standard advice. Okay, so you're eating 2,000 calories a day, eat 1,500 calories a day, you'll lose a pound of fat per week. So people do it, they lose weight at first, then it slowly comes back. And then people say, well, you slipped on your diet. That's the real problem. So the question is it that the diet doesn't work, or is it that the people don't do the diet? And that's the problem, right? And in a sense, it actually doesn't matter because in the end of the day, they failed. So whether the diet doesn't work or the people won't do the diet, it's the same thing. So people have all these strategies to follow the diet, and you've got calorie counting apps and this and that. To me, I think it's that the diet doesn't work, and but I think it's actually a bit of both. So, but it doesn't matter. The strategy is not successful. So therefore, it doesn't matter why. Like, I'm interested in results. I'm not so interested in, because I still need to face that patient in my office at the end of the day. So I don't really care why it doesn't work. If the strategy doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Use something else. It's sort of like me saying, okay, well, you say to your son, well, if you stay in your room sort of 18 hours a day and just study and study and study and study, you'll get an A. It's like, and then you find out, well, he's been sneaking out and going out. It's like, well, it doesn't matter if the strategy works, but he doesn't do it, versus the strategy that doesn't work. At the end of the day, he's still not getting the results.
Yeah,
so
it's the results that matter.
Change that strategy. So maybe, locking people up in their room is not a good strategy. Maybe you have to engage people, make it more fun. Get a different teacher, it doesn't matter why you think it doesn't work. It's what's more important than the why it doesn't work is, does it work or not, right? You have to start at the basics. If that strategy fails, then you can try and tweak it. And there's been plenty of that over the last, 30 years. But no matter how you tweak it, it doesn't work. So that's the thing. So therefore, come up with a new strategy, right? To me, that's the more logical thing to do, rather than sort of beat this horse who's already dead, right? It makes no sense to me. If this is a new strategy and nobody's ever tried stuff, sure, but no, this is an old strategy. It's been taught for like 50 years.
Yeah, I've never met anybody who's started a diet and is still on that diet.
Yeah,
they always end up coming to a conclusion, and then they're just looking for the next fad to get them through to whatever their short-term weight loss goal is.
yeah, and this is one of the things that I talk about sometimes, is that, well, you have all these diets that sort of come and go, right? So this diet's popular, then this diet's popular, then this diet's popular. So, and I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with the diets, but if that's not really a sustainable way of eating, then it's going to be really, really, really hard to stick to it. That is, you can stick with an ultra low fat diet, but if you can't keep it up for your whole life, then it doesn't really matter, or paleo or keto or whatever. But you go back to fasting and say, well, have people fasted? It's like, yes, literally billions of people fast for their whole adult lives. And people have done so for thousands of years. You can read about it in the Bible. You can read about it in the Quran. You can read about it in, the Buddhist texts. You can read about it in the Hindu texts. So literally, it's been part of our human history since we became human. So therefore, it is a sustainable strategy, because literally billions of people have proven. So take Ramadan, for example, where people fast 1 month of the year. Well, do people do it? Yes, a lot of people do it. Fasting at Lent, just before Easter. Do people do it? Yes, literally millions of people do this. Or fish on Fridays, or fasting on Fridays, or Ash Wednesday, or fasting on Yom Kippur. Literally millions of people are doing this for their entire adult life. So you can't say that nobody ever does it. It's like, it's not fun. But can you do it? That's a different question.
Yeah, it's literally a part of the oldest text that we have in records.
Exactly.
So there's something to it. Now, as an intervention for your patients, if you're treating them because of diseases associated with weight loss, I'm assuming that they're people who have always had a hard time, or they've always struggled with the food that they eat. How effective is fasting for them? How sustainable is it for these patients?
The thing is that it is sustainable, sort of, if you go back to the 1970s, so you have people who finish dinner at like 6 o'clock, because remember, this is a time when women were staying home and stuff. So dinner was at 6 o'clock, breakfast was at 8 o'clock. You had a 14-hour fast every day. And that was not, you didn't think of it as fasting, but it was. You didn't eat after dinner. Because if you wanted a bedtime snack, your mom would say, no, you should have ate more at dinner. If you wanted an after school snack, she'd say, no, you're going to ruin your dinner. So there's this idea that you have to fast every day. There's a cycle between feeding and fasting. And that's where you get the word breakfast, break your fast. In French, it's déjeuner, which déjeuner is the French verb to fast. So literally in our human language is embedded this idea that fasting is just a part of this normal cycle. So, it's like, can people sustain it? Absolutely, they can sustain it. It's just a matter of how long, what your normal traditions are. And remember, in the 1970s, it's a time when there's not a lot of, in America anyway, not a lot of starvation going on. So it's not like people have no food. It's just that it wasn't acceptable to eat food outside of these specific times, as opposed to now, where it's acceptable to eat food almost anywhere. So you can eat in your car, you can eat, at your computer desk, you can eat in the movie theaters, you can eat anywhere you want, and people will make it easy for you. You go to a meeting, and there's a boardroom, and somebody has ordered a plate of cookies, and you go to a conference, and after a full breakfast at 10:30, they'll wheel out the coffee, and there's some muffins, and it's like, why did you need muffins? Didn't you eat breakfast? Like, there's a full breakfast. If you wanted it, you should have ate it then. But there's this idea that we're supposed to eat all the time, and that's what's more dangerous than anything else. It's not that we can't do it. It's that our norms have shaped us, and it starts in school, where people are talking about, oh, you got to have a snack. You got to have a snack. You know, you're playing soccer, and in between the halves, somebody has to bring a snack. It's like, why? It's like, you can play soccer without eating a snack. You know, it's perfectly okay. But the kids don't do that this day. So we sort of ingrain it into them that you have to snack, 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 snack. And if you eat all the time, then you're going to be healthy. That's what we tell them. And it's actually not true, because in the 70s, virtually everybody did this without a problem. They just didn't think about it.
Right. Yeah. So what type of fasting are you recommending to
It all
patients, or to just
depends.
anyone in general?
It all depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're relatively healthy and so on, then there's no reason why you couldn't follow a sort of 1970s style eating regimen. That is breakfast, lunch, dinner, no snacks, no bedtime snacks, right? 3 meals a day, you get 12 to 14 hours of fasting, and that's it, right? But remember, you're eating a relatively early dinner, but this is a sort of strategy that allowed millions of people in North America to effortlessly maintain a normal weight. Remember, like, that's important, because if you look at pictures from the 70s, there's almost no obesity. Like, look at a beach scene from the 70s, or look at an old 70s TV show. And, you know, you look at a street scene or something, people are skinny. Like, whoa, they look anorexic now.
Yeah.
It's scary how skinny they are. But remember, they're eating really whatever they want. They're eating meat and potatoes, they're eating ice cream, they're eating this, they're eating that. Nobody's really watching. The diet industry doesn't even exist, because that fasting period is so effective at maintaining weight, as long as you do it every single night. Like, yeah, sure, maybe once in a while you'll go out and have a late dinner, right? But in general, the Monday to Friday weekday dinner with your family is done, and then you don't eat after that. So you could do that. If you're trying to lose weight, then you simply increase the amount of time. So when you're not eating, your body is going to be forced to burn some of those calories. So therefore, you simply give it more time. So you can go to like a 16-hour fasting, which is an 8-hour eating window, which is sometimes called time restricted eating, or you go to like a 24-hour fasting period, which is a 24-hour, which is a one meal a day, sort of like breakfast to breakfast or lunch to lunch sort of thing. So it's 24 hours of fasting.
Yeah.
So that's just if you want to lose weight.
So what is the purpose of hunger, if it's not to tell us that we need some food to fuel us at that moment?
Hunger is a very it's not simply that we need energy. So if you have somebody who's very obese, for example, you could have 100 pounds of excess fat and still be hungry. That happens all the time.
Right.
So the question is, why would you be hungry? You really shouldn't be hungry, because you're carrying, hundreds of thousands of calories in the form of body fat on your body that is actually making you sick, that you should use before you start
Yeah.
getting hungry. So
It's
the
like you're a
question
car
is,
going to the gas station. You've already got a full tank, but you're trying to put more
yeah,
gasoline in the
exactly.
engine.
Yeah, and then you do, and this is the big problem, is when you do, say your tank is full and you do put more gas in, is going to spill over, right? And then you wind with gas in your trunk, which is going to make you sick. So this is the whole issue, and this is what's really interesting, is that that's not the way the body is supposed to work. The body, if your fat stores, and this is the reason you don't see obese animals in the wild, because if you're obese as an animal, you'll either get eaten or you can't catch food or whatever, right? So you never see morbidly obese, wild animals,
Right. Unless the
domestic.
bear is hibernating.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But you see this in domesticated animals, but not so much in like wild cats and wild dogs and stuff. So the percentage body fat is actually very tightly controlled. So as your fat mass expands, you're supposed to produce this leptin, which feeds back and tells your body that, hey, you have too many fat stores. Just like the tank, of gas, when it gets too full, it feeds back and it says, oh, you're at full, you don't need to stop. So this feeds back and releases leptin, goes back to your brain, and actually makes you want to stop eating. So the question is, how are you getting around this? And part of it is some of the foods that we're eating simply don't trigger our satiety signals. That is, you can eat foods even if you're brain is saying that, well, you don't need to eat. So we get into this schedule where we're eating, 3, 6 meals a day without even thinking about it, because say you have breakfast, then you go to a meeting and you have muffins there, and then you have lunch, and then you go to a 3 o'clock meeting and somebody has cookies there, and then you go to dinner, then you go to drinks with your friend. All of a sudden you're at 6 meals a day without even thinking that you've done anything wrong. But the other thing is that when you eat foods that are not satiating, that are not filling, you can eat them. So if you eat a full buffet, for example, you go to the Chinese buffet, you eat a lot of food, and then you try to eat some real food, like natural food, like a pork chop, like you can't stuff that pork chop in. That's why you have these restaurants that give you a free steak if you eat that 60-ounce steak in an hour or less, because you can't do it. It's virtually impossible. But if you were to say, oh, hey, here's some apple pie, it's like, yeah, you can shove that down, because because it's all processed carbohydrates and sugar, it circumvents that sort of satiety signaling. It doesn't activate, it doesn't tell you you're full, and therefore you can keep adding more even though you really shouldn't. As opposed to, like, if somebody were to offer you, like, oh, here's some, a big plate, a big bowl of bean salad after you're totally full, you'd be like, blah, no, I'm gonna throw up. But somebody offers you, here's a chocolate chip cookie, you're like, hey, yeah, I can do that, right? So this is the whole thing, is that you're circumventing the foods that we're eating, which was very often these highly processed carbohydrate-based foods that really, because people are eating low fat, there's low protein, there's no satiety signaling, therefore you can keep eating it there when you're full, and therefore you're sort of keep increasing your fat mass despite the fact that you really shouldn't be. And people get into this state where if you eat 3 meals a day, you will get hungry three times a day, because and there's this idea that you should never ever skip a meal, right? So you go to any weight loss clinic, people are like, no, you must eat breakfast. It's like, so you're overweight, you're not hungry, and you think you need to eat to lose weight. Like, how is eating going to make you lose weight? And that's the thing. It doesn't. So there's just all this bad advice out there. And then you get, you talk to the dietitian, oh, you need to eat 6 times a day. It's like, well, I'm not hungry 6 times a day. Too bad. Eat anyway. It's like, well, if you eat anyway, what do you think is going to happen? Your body is going to switch from burning calories to storing calories because you're eating. So then you just keep adding it. And so we have this sort of situation where you've got this, I think, really poor dietary advice based on very unphysiological principles, guiding us. And that's why you see all this obesity. Because honestly, if you're to take a 5-year-old and say, oh, here's a man who is, very overweight, how would you make him lose weight? You'd probably say, stop eating. That'd be the most correct answer, because just like that bear, he can actually fuel his entire body on his body fat for days and days and days.
Right. And what's your experience with extended fasting?
We use it in both clinically, and I've done it myself. It's actually not that difficult. It's actually quite interesting, because when you start doing these fasts, when you go into the multiple day fast, it's actually not that hard. So what's difficult is not what you think is difficult. So that sensation of hunger, it actually passes very quickly, especially if you're a bit overweight or you have body fat. Like if your body mass index is like 16, then no, you shouldn't fast. You might get into trouble. But as long as you're reasonable, you've got a bit of body fat, or even more than a little bit of body fat, it's actually not difficult. And I'll tell you that the hardest part is actually the psychological part of fasting, not the physical hunger part of fasting. What's much more difficult is oh, hey, let's go out, I'm in town for a couple of days, let's go have dinner, and wow, that pizza looks really delicious, even though I'm not hungry, I'd love to have a slice, sort of thing. That's the way more difficult part of fasting. The physical hunger is actually quite easy to manage. I actually have never found it very hard at all. Some patients, of course, have cravings and stuff, in which case it is more difficult. But once you get them through those cravings, it's easier. But yeah, it's a psychological part of fasting more than the physical part of fasting. That is really what people need to focus.
Yeah, like I just finished a 7-day fast myself, which is one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I got Mark to put us in contact. And I will say from my experience, the hunger, because most people I talk to about this, there's a few concerns that I had, and they're probably the same concerns that most people have when I talk to them about fasting. And the first and most important of which is that you're going to become so overwhelmed with hunger that you're not even going to get into the fast long enough for any of the other consequences to start manifesting. So the first thing is the hunger. And the thing that happened to me was that after I didn't do any research beforehand either words because I didn't want to bias my experience by my expectations of what was supposed to happen. So I wanted to sort of have like a genuine reaction to whatever was happening at the time. And I found that after the first day, the hunger, after 7 days, the hunger never reached a point that it was higher than it was during the first day. And if anything, I would say that it was diminishing that entire time. So
Yeah.
I actually saw one of your lectures, you're talking about how ghrelin, the hunger hormone, gets reduced the longer
Yeah.
that you're fasting.
Yeah. That's actually interesting because that's exactly what I would have predicted. So day 2 is usually the worst day. So and then hunger actually continuously recedes after that. If you get down to a certain weight, it will probably go up. But the point is that the body is basically fueling itself on your body fat, so you're not that hungry. And that's sort of the secret of how these people do these 30-day fasts and so on. It's like people assume that they're constantly battling hunger. And the truth is that they're not. They're actually just doing what they normally do. They just aren't eating. And even the hunger on the first day, the first couple of days, which I always say is the toughest ones, it's like half an hour sort of thing, right? The hunger comes, and I've done a few of these longer fasts myself, and the hunger comes and it gets really bad sometimes in the first couple of days, but it doesn't last. And I find that when I'm doing work, it's almost like, like a little bug. You sort of like do this and it goes away, sort of thing, right? Like when you're getting into it. And I actually notice this all the time. So for example, when I do home renovations, like I'm painting something, like I start to just get really into it, and then it's like, oh, it's dinner time, and then I'm sort of annoyed because I have to stop what I'm doing. It's like, but I have all this work to do. And like, just leave me alone. But then I like, okay, fine, because it's a social thing, right? So it's a dinner. Meals are not just about sustenance. It's also about community and eating with people and so on, right? So then you put down your thing. But I've always found that, when I'm really busy and really focused on something, because the physical hunger is a small portion of it, if I'm so focused that I don't even notice the hunger, it just passes, right? I could go the whole day. And this happens to a lot of doctors when they're working, is that they get so busy that the whole day passes and they realize they haven't eaten at all and they haven't had any hunger. And this is why a lot of doctors think, they start hearing about fasting and they go, oh, I did this all the time when I was in medical school and residency, but not because I was trying to lose weight, just because I got so busy. And it's true, I never had that hunger. So the longer fast, that would have, your experience is almost exactly what I would have expected. It just gets easier and easier, except the only thing I find is that, you pass by and say, oh, there's all this delicious fruit and stuff.
It's like, why can I smell
like
this restaurant from a block away all of a sudden?
Yeah, exactly. So the psychological part is hard. And I'll actually look at it and I'll go, I really want to eat this, but if this wasn't here, but I wouldn't have even been hungry at all. Like I'm not even hungry. I just would like to eat this, but I'm not hungry, right? It's just this sort of, oh, I know that's delicious and I'd like to eat it, but then it's so that's exactly what the research is showing, that's what you experienced is exactly what I would have thought.
Yeah, and the second thing that sort of dovetails off of, or the second concern that I had that dovetails off of exactly what you're saying, is that once I got into the fast and say that the hunger wasn't a problem, my second biggest concern was that I wasn't going to be able to concentrate on doing any of the tasks that I had to get done that week. But what I found was that it was the most productive week that I've had in possibly ever. And I'm curious, like, one, because just the preparation, everything surrounding food takes so much of your time that now my entire calendar is free and I could spend my time doing whatever work tasks I need to do. which is another thing. I believe that's focusing on getting work done sort of distracts yourself from the hunger, so it's easier to ignore those hunger pains. But what I was wondering is that why you're getting the increased focus? Because you don't have to think about, like, you're sort of offloading this cognitive task of food, or are there other physiological reasons?
I think your brain actually works at a higher level. So what's very interesting is that as you don't eat, certain hormones go down, but other ones go up. And I think that some of them tend to enhance concentration. So you can look at memory tasks and all that. People actually do better when they don't eat. They do better on memory tasks. And what's really interesting too is that if you look at the history, there are actually all these cases in history where people have noticed that when they are starving, like literally starving, that their brain goes into sort of like overdrive. So there's this biography called Unbroken, I think, Unbroken by Lauren Hillebrand. It was about a prisoner of war in World War II, Japan, an American who got caught. So he's literally starving, like they're literally eating like almost nothing. And what I thought was very interesting was that he writes that it was simply the mental clarity that comes from starvation. So he was talking about how one guy had learned Norwegian in like a week, and another guy was reading books in his mind purely from memory, like these incredible mental feats. And everybody in that sort of camp knew is that when you're starving, your brain, your brain function just goes crazy and is really, really productive. And I thought that was interesting. Pythagoras, the ancient Greek mathematician, he would require his students to fast before coming into class so that they could concentrate. And so there's this idea that, and again, if you look at the animal kingdom, you say, okay, well, look at the hungry wolf versus the lion who just ate. So the hungry wolf is dialed in and focused like you wouldn't believe. The lion just wants to sleep. So there's this, and if you think, okay, Thanksgiving, you've ate all this turkey. Like, are you really zoned in, or do you just want to go to sleep and watch some football, right? Nothing too mentally taxing. So the point is that this is actually exactly what we would expect to see, that mental concentration goes up. And this is one of the reasons that fasting has sort of exploded in Silicon Valley and those areas, because for them, it's a natural way for not only to getting healthy, but to boosting your sort of mental capabilities, because the difference there is that literally, every edge of, mental ability could mean millions of dollars. It could be the difference between like Facebook and MySpace sort of thing, right? You lose and you got nothing. You win and you've got everything. So for them, they're like way into fasting because they know that it's going to give them that sort of mental edge on somebody else who's sort of stuffing their face and getting into this mental fog that you get like after Thanksgiving sort of thing, right? If you're working like that every day, they're like, no, I want to work, with a clear head. So that's what they do. So it's a really interesting. It's really interesting. Exactly, again, what we see when you look into history. It's what you see when you look into the research. This sort of mental clarity. It's very interesting.
Do we know the mechanism that's causing the mental clarity?
That's a harder question to answer. Some people think it's because of the ketones. The brain works better on ketones. I'm not sure what else it is. The other place that it's very interesting is in terms of Alzheimer's prevention. So Alzheimer's is sort of a chronic disease where you get this buildup of gucky protein and stuff, and whether you can delay the onset of it with something like fasting. Again, it's all very interesting and speculative, but the mechanism, no, I don't think anybody knows.
Right. So we wouldn't. So, and I know another benefit of fasting is autophagy, where your body is repairing and replacing damaged cells. Do we know what the optimal length of a fast would be, and would it vary by body fat percentage or some other variable?
No, we don't know. So there's no easy way to measure whether you're getting into autophagy or not. Whether all types of fast, like, whether if you drink coffee, it's going to like kick you out of autophagy. Nobody knows the answer to those. And of course, Uh, those are good questions. If I had to guess, I'd say you'd need to get into about 18 to 24 hours to get autophagy going. If you're following a very low carbohydrate diet, it's possible perhaps you may get into that sooner. Um, if you're eating a very low protein diet, which may not be that good for other reasons, maybe you'd get into it a little faster. So it's all quite
Speculative.
speculative. Yeah, nobody knows. Autophagy itself as a field is very, very young.
Right. And would you say the same about the mental benefits, where it's, since we don't know the mechanism that's causing it, we can't really prescribe a certain length of time to fast for in order to receive the maximum benefits?
Yeah, and my guess is that the mental benefits are sort of a continuous spectrum. That is, the longer you go, the more you'll notice it. And my
Yeah.
guess is that there's a huge variability person to person as to what they notice. If you took a lot of people, I think you'd find that, the longer out you've gone, the more mentally clear you are. Sort of like, just like Thanksgiving, you go out like immediately, your performance is going to drop a hell of a lot. And then depending on the length of how much you ate, it probably is longer, and then you slowly recover and then go up. So for mental ability, my guess is that it just depends on how much you ate and sort of how long from when you've eaten.
Yeah. I'll say that after 7 days, I felt like I had a direct communication channel to God himself. It was ridiculous, the amount of mental clarity. I've never felt that great in my entire life. And by the end of this fast, I was like questioning, do I just stop eating forever? I want to maintain these benefits as long as I possibly can.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing, and that's why some people do. I mean, people have done longer, but you can easily tweak it, right? So one, you have to eat at some point because you do need nutrients and so on. But there are easy ways to tweak it. Like one, for example, if you're having a competition or a presentation or a big meeting or something, then you know that you could sort of go into it with a clear head by avoiding eating the 24, 36, 72 hours prior to that, and say, okay, well, I'm coming into this and I've got this really clear head. Or you're going into a big negotiation and you're going to tweak it by, okay, I'm going in, I want to have all my faculties with me. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to adjust my fasting schedule so that I have a good period, and I go in there. And I think that these sort of things are legitimate, and I think that it makes a lot of sense to sort of adjust it like that.
Yeah. And if you were recommending fasting, I guess it's probably hard to make broad recommendations considering how would it be a function of somebody's body fat percentage? Or
It
is it
would
length and
be
duration, or
um,
duration and frequency?
Yeah, and it's really also a factor of what it is you're looking for. So if you're looking for autophagy, then you should do this. If you're looking for the mental benefits, then you should do this. If you're looking for weight loss, then you should do this. So it's all different. None of this is very well mapped out. But again, something like, so age, if somebody's older, I'm going to start slower and ramp up slower, right? As opposed to somebody young, maybe you can jump in and do 7 days right off the bat. But I would never do that for a 75-year-old with type 2 diabetes, for example. So you'd never, so you adjust it based on those factors. But yeah, it's going to differ for everybody. Somebody who's not looking to lose weight, but just wants some of the other benefits. Somebody who's undergoing cancer treatment, what's the optimal regimen? So these are all areas that sort of need better research. It's
Right.
slowly coming out, but considering that 5 years ago when I started talking about it, everybody just thought it was a horrible idea, like the stupidest thing that anybody had ever heard. That was sort of what people thought about
Yeah.
fasting for any reason.
Well, when I started researching nutrition, just like no more than a decade ago, the common knowledge at the time was that you want to eat 6 to 7 small meals per day. Otherwise, your metabolism is going to slow down and you're going to start gaining weight.
Yeah, that was what they taught us. So that's what they said. It turns out it wasn't true at all. And in fact, there was no data to show that was true in anywhere. So it's sort of ridiculous that we had all these sort of pet beliefs based on nothing then more than people kept saying it. So we thought it must be true, sort of thing, right? It was just this enormous, enormous sort of idea that just
Yeah.
got out of hand.
I think intuitively it just sounds like it makes sense. Yeah, you eat more meals, your metabolism's continuously running, so you're burning more calories, and it's just like you don't really have to think about it any deeper than that, and people just run
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, I think that's what they did. And then you hear it all the time, and you've heard it since, for the last 10 years. So therefore, hey, it must be true because everybody says so. And that's sort of where we wound up.
Yeah. If someone is doing an extended fast, is there anything that you recommend that they take or do to prepare for the fast and during the fast?
Nothing specific. I mean, before the fast, you can switch to a low carbohydrate diet. And the point is that if you're fasting, you're basically fueling yourself on body fat. So whether you fuel yourself on body fat or animal fat, like your dietary fat. So if you're eating uh, fat in your diet, avocados and salmon and whatever, your body needs to fuel itself on fat. So the basic metabolism of whether you're using dietary fat or body fat is the same. So therefore, the transition to fasting is a lot easier from a low carbohydrate diet. So it makes it better to do that. During the actual fast itself, no, nothing specific. I tell people to just stay hydrated. I recommend a lot of green tea because one, it's got no calories, and two, it may have these sort of beneficial phytochemicals called catechins, which may suppress your appetite. There's some caffeine to sort of make sure your metabolism stays high. The catechins are also thought to be beneficial for all kinds of diseases like diabetes and cancer and so on. And there's data from Japan. People who drink a lot of green tea have less cancer, that kind of thing, right? So, yeah, I don't know if it's true or not, but on the other hand, it's pretty harmless to drink green tea. So that's
Right.
why I recommend it. The risks are super low, and the potential benefits are there, and it's not really high cost. We have these fasting teas that I helped Peak Tea develop, which has some flavoring, so it keeps it interesting when you're trying to stay hydrated, other than just water. So there's various things that can help during a fast. So for example, if I say if you get very hungry, then one, know that that sort of wave is going to pass. Go get yourself a big cup of green tea, and by the time you finish it, your hunger will mostly have receded, right? So get some green tea and go do something, right? Go to your computer and do something fun or do something engaging, and by the time you sort of finish your tea, you've mostly forgotten and the hunger will have receded. So, little strategies like that to get through the day.
Right. What about because the biggest problem, the only real problem that I had during the fast was I was getting very, very, very bad leg cramps. Is there
Yeah.
anything to supplement should I be taking a magnesium
Yeah.
supplement or anything
Magnesium
like
is
that?
probably the main one for cramps. So not everybody gets the cramps. It's very common to get low magnesium. So magnesium can be either oral supplements, which you can buy over the counter, or you can get magnesium through your skin, which is through Epsom salts.
Epsom salts, that's what I was doing.
Soak in it in the bath. And then there's this magnesium oil, which is basically Epsom salts dissolved in some water. But people don't always like taking a bath, so you spray it on your body, you rub it in, and then it slowly absorbs without you needing to sort of soak in the bath. So there's several options for magnesium, but the cramps is, mainly magnesium. Some people use pickle juice with no added sugar. Again, just sort of full of these, there's all kinds of stuff in pickle juice, but they find it helps with cramps as well.
Right. Well, it looks like the 45 minutes is up, so I don't want to take any more of your time. I really appreciate you talking to me. But one question I actually had that came to me when I was doing this fast, because I was feeling like at the end of the 7 days, I thought I am feeling better than I've ever felt in my entire life. I don't ever want this to go away. So I was thinking, what if I had the option of never eating food again, but I could be in the absolute perfect health as if I'm eating the absolute perfect diet and feel like that for the rest of my life, or I could eat any food that I want for the rest of my life and maintain my current state of health, which one would I choose? I'm wondering which one of those options would you choose?
Um, I don't know. I mean, you have to eat. I mean, I think it's a cycle. So, the fasting does give you tremendous benefits, but I wonder if you can actually find a happy sort of medium in there. And I think you can with cutting out a lot of the processed foods, and making sure you eat low sugar. Pretty much everybody agrees that the sugar is not so good for you. And the fasting. So to keep with doing the fasting. And then, so what I do is sort of mix it up. So between the eating and the short fast and the long fast, I do the longer fast every so often, and I get so I'm trying to sort of hedge my bets almost to get a bit of this, a bit of that, and a bit of this, right? And then you're getting everything, because again, if you stay in that state for a long time, you really just get used to it, right? Then everything's a downer, right?
Right.
So you want to sort of vary it a little bit, right? Everything when you're at one state, you can't. It's hard to stay at that state for too long. You really have to cycle it. The body that's what it naturally does. So yeah, I would sort of try and cycle that, and you throw those long ones in there all the time so they can feel good and stuff. Yeah, if you feel good all the time, it's just like when people who are very rich, you assume they're happy, and it's like many times they're not. What the research shows is that once you pass a certain threshold of income where you're not worried about, if you have money to pay the bills, it sort of levels off. Like the richer you go, it's not like the more happy you are. You can afford better stuff, but you're not any happier, right? It's the same thing. So if you're to keep at that level all the time, then everything else just feels down for you.
Right.
If you get what I mean, it's sort of
I know exactly what you mean, because I've been on a carnivore diet now for 4 months. I was originally doing it for 3 months because I was doing it for this documentary, and then with COVID happening, I had to extend it. And at first I started feeling it was really beneficial, and now I'm just like, I'm missing out on way too much of the social value from food for me to be continuing with this for any extended period of time.
The social part of eating is actually a huge part. Like, again, if you look at history, it's you always celebrate with a meal, right? Birthdays, weddings, feasts, like holidays, it's a feast, right? You got to, like, one is part of the other. Like, this is just the way that humans are, right? So to do it all the time is just like you almost can't do it. And I actually find that is the hardest part of doing any extended fast, is that I have to wait for a chunk of time where it's like, because you don't want to go to somebody's house and say, "Oh, I'm not eating." It's like, I just, you're a guest, man. It's like your host is gonna be like, "What the hell? I just made all this food for you, and you're not eating," right? He's super rude, right? So I always find the long fasts are tough because you always have to have this chunk of time where you're just not doing anything. Or you don't have people over, or that's why people are you're breaking bread with people and stuff, right? It's like, well, yeah, it means something. So that's why the longer fast, great to do it every so often, but to do it all the time, it would be very difficult, I think, to do.
Yeah, I think so too. That's something I was thinking about, is that for the majority of human history, we were living in these tribes, and a celebration was probably, we just killed a woolly mammoth, so now we're all going to be eating this thing together. So even just doing something like being on a diet, you're already isolating yourself from all your social circles, because you're saying, hey, I'm not part of this tribe. I'm not eating with you guys, which is something that we sort of evolved to do together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking to me.
You're welcome.
And one thing just to mention, you mentioned like BMI under 16, it might cause some problems, but just in case you're curious, I believe I started this carnivore diet at about 11.5% body fat. And since then I dropped 10 pounds, 12 pounds.
Wow.
So I'm guessing I was around 8.5% just based off of past knowledge. I'm guessing I started this around 8.5% body fat, tested my strength on different body weight exercises before the 7 days. And at the end of the 7 days, all of the exercises remained stable except for one where I increased it by 1 repetition. So even starting from that lower body fat percentage, I was still able to maintain my strength throughout at least for the test that I did. Like, who knows if I would have kept going and did like a full-on workout, then I might have lost something near the end. But at the initial stages, there was nothing lost from a muscle perspective.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it either. Not with carnivore, because you're still eating quite a bit of.
That was the fast. That was after the fast.
Oh, during the fasting. Yeah, same thing with the fast. I mean, if you look past sort of the first day, the first 30 hours, say, you're almost entirely metabolizing fat. There's very little other stuff that's being metabolized. Protein is very low. So you should, as long as you're exercising. This is the thing, is that exercise is this process where you put the body under stress and it gets stronger. So if you don't exercise, yes, your body will say, hey, look at all this extra muscle that's just sitting there. Let's just get rid of that because we need to buckle down. So if you're exercising, then you're going to maintain it. But that's the key, is that if you're not exercising and fasting, you may wind up losing a bit of muscular strength because your body is not going to want to maintain that muscle in the face of reduced food, because it makes no survival sense for you to maintain. Like, say you have very strong triceps because you do a lot of bench press, and then you fast and you're not doing a bench press. Well, your body's like, whoa, this is a lot of extra muscle that I don't need because I'm a computer analyst and I don't do bench presses, right? So I'm going to get rid of this triceps because why do I need it, right? So you may wind up losing some if you're not sort of putting that strain on the body. Just like astronauts, you put no strain on the body, have no gravity, your bones just go to crap, right? Because there's no strain. Your body will not maintain it because it makes no sense for you to maintain tissues that have no purpose. So that's the same with the fast. If you're still exercising, then your body is going to maintain that.
Right. Well, the surprising thing for me was I was not exercising during the fast either. So I was worried that if I was exercising, that was going to cause the muscles to break down even further because I'm not giving it anything to recover from the stress that I'm putting it under. But you would recommend, do it to somebody who's going into this for the first time, you would recommend continuing their exercise?
You should do everything you normally do. Like, that's what I would recommend. I mean, 7 days may be too short to notice anything, but if you were to do this repeatedly for months, I would expect that to see some muscle loss. If you're sort of normally exercising and then stop exercising, then you shouldn't. But really, you should do everything you normally do,
right,
and let your body take care of where it gets its energy from. It's going to pull it from body fat. That's what it's there for.
Right. Would you say there's a point where you're doing it too frequently? Like if you're going to do 5 days every month, or is there a certain point where you'd say be careful, or would you just say gauge it based on how you feel?
So. I think it depends on how you feel. And I think that I think the human body is an incredibly resourceful thing, and it will figure out the best way to get the energy that you need. So if I would say just do whatever you want to do. If you want to fast a lot, then fast a lot, right? Your body will figure out where it's going to come from. Then you decide, right? Is it good or is it bad? Then you can go from there.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much. I think I already kept you longer than you had time available for. So really appreciate it. And when things start to open back up in Toronto, I would love to speak with you in person. Hopefully we can do that again at some point in the future.
Hopefully. All right,
awesome.
Take care.
Well, thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of the day.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
You too.